Hello! In my last video in the series Economics for You, I spoke about opportunity cost. Today I'm going to talk about a very closely related idea, sunk costs. So what are sunk costs? Sunk costs are costs that have been incurred. Sunk costs are costs that may never be recovered. Note that the use of the term sunk costs is expansive. It includes explicit or monetary costs as well as implicit costs, the costs of time, effort, and emotional investments. Sunk costs are a potential trap in the sense that prior costs and investments, those that you made yesterday and earlier, exert an influence on today's decisions. The sunk cost dilemma is this: should I continue to incur this cost because I incurred this cost earlier? Or should I quit incurring this cost and forsake any possible benefits from prior investments? Let me give you 6 examples of how you and I encounter the sunk cost dilemma in our lives. Example 1, staying at a job that we dislike. Why do we do that? Because we have much to lose from leaving, such as a bonus or a pension. Example 2, persisting with your struggling startup. Why do we do that? Because we have much to lose by abandoning the project, such as, for example, our sense of self-worth, our perception of how others will see us. Example 3, going to a gym even though we hate every moment of it. Why do we do that? Well, because we paid an annual membership fee. Example 4, holding on to an asset that has lost a substantial portion of its value. For example, holding on to your cryptocurrency, even though it is trading at half its value possibly. Why? Because if you quit, you have to acknowledge or write off this loss. Example 5, playing a quarterback because you paid a lot to get him. Indeed, this was the case for the Washington Redskins and RG3, Robert Griffin III. Example 6, holding on to something precious from your past. For example, a vintage car. We get relatively little utility from it today, and we spend a lot in maintaining it, but we continue to do so because of the special memories that it holds for us. What about the economics of sunk costs? Well, the economics of sunk costs is better understood alongside the psychology of sunk costs. So why do sunk costs influence our decisions? Behavioral scientists say humans have a commitment bias. That is, a tendency to persist with behaviors and actions, even when such behaviors and actions do not serve us well anymore. Commitment bias is tied to loss aversion. An example of this would be losing $10,000 would give us substantially more disutility than the utility one gets from winning $10,000. A consequence of loss aversion is that we fight harder to defend things we already have and are ready to take substantial risks to hold on to them. Quitting is hard because it requires an acknowledgement of failure. Quitting often implies a loss of reputation, self-worth, relationships, and status. Now let me give you an example of sunk costs. I was strolling through the library last month and I came across a book on the making of a movie, and realized as I was reading it that what this studio was wrestling with was the sunk cost dilemma that I've been speaking to you about. I'm sure all of you will know this movie, but I will keep you in suspense by not revealing its name. Please try guessing as I speak about it. So there's this director, a famous director, who pitches an idea for a movie to the studio. And here's what he says about the movie. It's a love story with drama. No violence per se. No box office stars. The reaction of the studio heads was this: skepticism. But they were very keen to work with the director, so they roped in another studio as a partner. After much discussion, the production budget was set at $110 million. And it was estimated that the break-even would be somewhere between $200 million and $250 million. Shooting commences. There was elaborate set construction which took longer than expected. And then mishaps on the set, such as actors incurring minor injuries during filming, actors and crew falling ill from exposure to the elements, an attempted poisoning of the film crew, which led to 50 people being hospitalized. Less than halfway through production costs had hit $100 million, and it was decision time for the studio executives. The questions were this: should they jettison the project or continue? The studio executives were petrified that abandoning the movie could cost them their jobs. The studio head was especially fearful of facing up to the big boss and admitting that a movie had to be abandoned after more than $100 million was spent. But he was also fearful because persisting could mean a catastrophic loss, so big that he and his colleagues could possibly never again work in the industry. Here's what the studio head had to say. The budget news was so phenomenally bad on a daily basis. We all went through a tough 8 or 9 months. There has just never been this expensive a movie in history. And you wonder what happens if it fails. And then here's what the director of the movie had to say. We labored the last 6 months in the absolute knowledge that the studios would lose $100 million. It was a certainty. By the time production was complete, the release date had to be delayed by 5 months. Production costs had hit $210 million, and marketing costs and distribution costs were estimated to be about $250 million. The movie, The Titanic. All of you, or many of you, will have seen it. Certainly everybody will know about it. Now, how did the movie do? You already know that, but I want to recount some important details. It was released on December 19th, 1997. It was, as the studios put it, a quiet opening day that Friday, about $8 million in revenue. Then, $28 million in box office revenue on the first weekend, followed by 10 straight weeks of $20 million plus weekends. Word of mouth propelled the movie forward. 20th Century Fox, one of the studios behind the movie, estimated that 15% of all teenage girls had seen the movie twice in the first 5 weeks. It was the first film to hit $1 billion in box office revenues. It was the highest grossing film in the world for 12 straight years, until it was overtaken by Avatar in 2009. And as of 2023, the movie has earned $2.57 billion in box office revenues. It went on to win 11 Oscar awards and an estimated $4 billion in profit from all sources of revenue. What's the lesson here? Sometimes our predictions are totally wrong and things turn out unimaginably well. I want to close with some final thoughts. The sunk cost dilemma is this: should you persist or should you quit? Rational thinking calls for us to face up to new realities, to admit that what we thought was feasible and ideal may no longer be so. Rational thinking calls for us to update our expectations of incremental costs and incremental benefits. But remember this: if one were to ruthlessly apply the cost-benefit rule, one would likely not do many things in life, such as completing a PhD starting a company, getting married, or having children. It takes a lot of ignorance and foolishness to do the things that make our lives special. I want to give the last word to Yuval Noah Harari, who in his book Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, says, paradoxically, the more sacrifices we make for an imaginary story, the more tenaciously we hold on to it, because we desperately want to give meaning to those sacrifices and the suffering we have caused.